The rebel. The word alone evokes images of defiance, revolution, and those who dare to challenge the status quo. Think of Galileo, branded a heretic for insisting the earth moves around the sun. Think of Malcolm X, whose fierce voice shook the foundations of injustice. Or even V from V for Vendetta, a masked symbol of uprising against tyranny. These figures spark admiration, but also fear. So we have to ask, is rebellion truly a force for freedom, or just another path to destruction? On this channel, we've explored the hero, the one who overcomes challenges, the fool, the risk taker who transforms through chaos, the sage, the seeker of wisdom, and the ruler, the master of order and responsibility. But what about the rebel, the one who breaks the rules, exposes illusions, and fights for change, even at a great cost? The rebel isn't just an outer figure. It's a psychological force within us all. It whispers when we see injustice. It burns when we feel trapped. It urges us to break free. But there's a paradox here. As Carl Jung once said, what you resist persists. The rebel who fights blindly may end up recreating the very systems they sought to destroy. Rebellion without reflection can spiral into chaos, or worse, become the destroyer. In this video, we'll dive into the rebel archetype, its revolutionary power, its shadow side, and the fine line between liberation and self-sabotage. We'll explore how to balance the rebel within, so you can create meaningful change without burning everything to the ground. Let's begin. So Carl Jung's model of the psyche is divided into three main parts: the conscious mind, the personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. The conscious mind is where our ego lives. The ego is the center of our conscious awareness, responsible for our sense of identity and our interactions with the outside world. It filters out perceptions, helping us navigate daily life by focusing on what we are aware of at any given moment. The personal unconscious, on the other hand, is where we store forgotten memories, suppressed thoughts, and feelings. Things we are not actively aware of, but can recall or bring to mind when needed. This is also where the shadow resides. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we reject or deny, often because they don't align with our self-image or society's expectations. However, understanding and integrating the shadow is essential for personal growth because it holds hidden strengths and insights, and being aware of it can also prevent you from committing the same mistakes over and over again. Lastly, the collective unconscious goes beyond the individual. It is a shared part of the human psyche containing archetypes, universal primal symbols and patterns of behavior that are common across cultures. This is something we all have in common as humans and are born with. It's in the collective unconscious where we find the 12 archetypes. These are patterns of behavior that resonate deeply within all of us. Today, we'll focus on one of the most provocative and complex archetypes, the rebel. As we see in countless myths, stories, and real-world movements, the rebel's journey represents the universal drive to challenge the status quo, expose injustice, and ignite transformation. And while the rebel's role is crucial for progress and awakening, it also has a dangerous shadow side, one we'll explore in depth. Let's go over what this rebel archetype even is. The rebel is someone who defies authority, challenges societal norms, and seeks freedom, not just for themselves, but often for others as well. In Jungian psychology, the rebel represents the part of us that refuses to conform, the part that senses when something is wrong and dares to disrupt it. Rebellion is more than just resistance. It's psychologically and historically vital. Without rebels, there would be no social progress. Every major shift in history, from revolutions to cultural renaissances, began with someone who questioned the rules. This archetype shows up in many forms. There are political rebels who fight oppressive systems, artistic rebels who push creative boundaries, and spiritual rebels who challenge dogma to pursue deeper truths. All of them are driven by a deep need to break free. Carl Jung believed that a core part of personal growth, what he called individuation, involves breaking away from the roles and identities society imposes on us. The rebel archetype is essential to that journey. It helps us ask, who am I? Really? When I strip away everything I was told to be. We see the rebel in figures like Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity, in the Buddha, who walked away from a life of royalty to seek enlightenment, in Nikola Tesla, who challenged conventional science and reimagined the future. These are not just stories. They're blueprints to transformation. One of the most dangerous patterns in history is the cycle of rebellion, when the oppressed overthrow their oppressors only to become tyrants themselves. We saw this in the French Revolution, where cries for liberty, equality, and fraternity devolved into the Reign of Terror. Centuries earlier, the English Civil War in 1642 to 1651 followed the same arc. Parliamentarians rose against the absolutism of Charles I, only to see Oliver Cromwell dissolve democracy and rule as a military dictator, persecuting dissenters with puritanical fervor. Even in our digital age, this pattern persists. The cyberpunks of the 1990s and early Bitcoin pioneers sought to dismantle centralized power through cryptography and decentralized currency, only to watch their tools become new instruments of financial speculation and surveillance, with crypto elites and institutional investors replicating the very systems they once vowed to escape. In modern times, rebellion is not always grassroots. It can be manufactured. Ruling elites have long known how to hijack the rebel spirit through mass psychosis and propaganda, manipulating people's anger to serve other agenda. What looks like a revolution might just be the system reinventing itself to stay in power. Movements that begin as genuine resistance can be co-opted, branded, and turned into tools of control. There's also the trap of destructive rebellion. When the desire to destroy outweighs the desire to create, this leads to chaos, self-sabotage, or a kind of perpetual resistance. Some rebels never evolve past opposition. They define themselves by what they're against, not what they stand for. And without a vision for something better, rebellion becomes noise instead of transformation. Think of activists so consumed by outrage that they alienate allies and collapse the movements they helped build. Without wisdom, the rebel burns down the old world, but never builds the new one. Psychologically, this shadow arises when we mistake rebellion for identity. When our ego clings to being the outsider, the fighter, or the victim, we stop growing. True rebellion isn't just about resistance, it's about renewal. But if we remain stuck in defiance, we risk becoming the very thing we once stood against. There are 4 major advantages of the rebel archetype that, if embraced in your own life, can lead to greater freedom, authenticity, and meaningful change. I'll bring in some powerful examples from pop culture, history, and real life to show how these qualities can play out. The first advantage: freedom and independence. At the core of the rebel archetype is the drive for freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of action, and freedom from illusion. Unlike those who conform to social expectations without question, the rebel dares to think for themselves. They peel back the layers of conditioning to discover what's real beneath the surface. They ask, whose rules am I following? And why? Think of Neo from The Matrix. His entire journey is about waking up from an artificial world, a system designed to keep people asleep. Once he sees the truth, he chooses the hard path of freedom, not just for himself, but for others as well. The rebel reminds us that to live authentically, we must break free from the roles and scripts imposed on us. In real life, this shows up anytime you decide not to blindly follow the crowd. When you question the assumptions you were raised with, choose a path that's unpopular, or refuse to fit into a box others have built for you. That's the rebel in action. And it's not just about rejecting the system, it's about reclaiming your autonomy. Number 2, innovation and progress. Nearly every major leap forward in science, society, and art has come from someone brave enough to break the mold. The rebel sees possibilities where others see boundaries. They're not afraid to question accepted knowledge, dismantle outdated traditions, or imagine entirely new worlds. Galileo is a powerful example. He challenged the church's view of the cosmos and redefined our understanding of the universe. Nikola Tesla envisioned technologies decades ahead of his time, despite being rejected by mainstream science. And artists in the punk movement reshaped music and fashion by rejecting commercial conformity and expressing raw, unfiltered truth. Whether it's inventing new ways of thinking or pioneering revolutionary ideas, rebels are the ones who push humanity forward. In your own life, this might look like starting a business that defies traditional norms, creating art that challenges the status quo, or even just standing firm in a belief no one else shares yet. Without rebels, progress doesn't happen. Number 3, resisting psychological control. In times of fear, crisis, or mass confusion, the rebel archetype becomes more important than ever. When groupthink takes over, when propaganda spreads unchecked, or when institutions try to suppress dissent, it's the rebel who sees through the illusion. They're the ones who resist psychological manipulation, what thinkers like Juice Mirlo called menticide, the killing of the mind. We see this in real-world whistleblowers like Julian Assange or Edward Snowden. Their courage to expose uncomfortable truths cut through the fog of mass deception. Rebels protect the integrity of thought and speech at great personal cost. Psychologically, developing the rebel within helps guard against mental slavery. It teaches you how to spot manipulation, how to think critically, and how to stay anchored in reality, especially when the world is losing its grip. It's about protecting your mind from being hijacked by fear or false narratives. Check out this video here about propaganda to learn more. Number 4, courage to challenge authority. Perhaps the most powerful trait of the rebel is their courage to confront injustice and corruption. Rebels speak up when no one else will. They shine a light on what's hidden and hold power to account. And while doing so can make them unpopular or even dangerous, it's often what sparks real change. Consider the Buddha, who left the comfort of his palace to seek truth and liberation, challenging the spiritual authorities of his time. Or Galileo, risking his freedom for the truth. Even in pop culture, we see characters like V from V for Vendetta, whose acts of defiance awaken a society trapped in fear and apathy. In your life, the courage can manifest in small but meaningful ways, calling out unfair treatment at work, standing up to social injustice, or simply refusing to stay silent in the face of wrongdoing. The rebel's gift is the strength to speak truth to power, even when it comes at a cost. Together, these traits, freedom, innovation, psychological resistance, and moral courage, make the rebel archetype a vital force for growth, truth, and transformation. But like any archetype, it comes with its own challenges, which we'll explore right now. The first challenge is isolation and persecution. One of the greatest challenges of the rebel archetype is the deep sense of isolation and persecution that often comes with going against the grain. Rebels are by nature disruptors, questioning norms, challenging authority, and refusing to conform. But in doing so, they often find themselves cast out by the very systems they hope to change. Society tends to punish those who think differently, labeling them as troublemakers or radicals. Take, for example, the artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. His rebellious art challenged racism, classism, and elitism of the art world, yet he struggled with feeling like an outsider. Even as he rose to fame, his success didn't shield him from the alienation that came with living on the fringes, and that emotional toll contributed to his early demise. In a very similar vein, revolutionaries throughout history like Malcolm X or Che Guevara were often celebrated and vilified in equal measure. Their refusal to compromise came with constant surveillance, persecution, and in many cases, death. Even though what these revolutionaries did was admirable and certainly important, it unfortunately may come at the price of having powerful enemies who endanger the rebel's life. I will reiterate, Though it's admirable, it certainly comes at a great price. In everyday life, rebels may face rejection from family, community, or peers simply for questioning the status quo. Their truth-telling can be seen as threatening rather than liberating. And over time, the loneliness of being misunderstood can weigh heavily on even the most passionate rebel. Number 2, rebellion without purpose. Another danger of the rebel archetype is rebellion for rebellion's sake, tearing down systems without a clear plan for what comes next. While rebellion can be a powerful force for justice, it can also devolve into chaos when there's no vision beyond destruction. In pop culture, think of Tyler Durden from Fight Club. His movement starts as a rebellion against consumerism and conformity, but quickly spirals into chaos. What began as a personal awakening becomes a dangerous ideology that recruits others into mindless violence. In the end, the rebellion loses its moral compass and becomes indistinguishable from the oppression it sought to destroy. This is a pattern we've seen in history too. During the French Revolution, mobs toppled a monarchy only to make way for the Reign of Terror, where thousands were executed under suspicion alone. Without a constructive vision, rebellion can consume itself, leaving only rubble in its wake. Number 3, the risk of becoming what you oppose. Perhaps the most ironic risk of the rebel archetype is becoming the very thing one sets out to fight. In their quest to overthrow tyranny, rebels may adopt the same controlling dogmatic tactics as their oppressors. The desire to liberate can mutate into the desire to dominate. History is littered with revolutionary leaders who, after toppling oppressive regimes, become tyrants themselves. In ancient Rome, Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon under the banner of defending the Republic, only to declare himself dictator for life, extinguishing the very democracy he claimed to protect. Centuries later, Maximilien Robespierre led the French Revolution with cries of liberty, equality, fraternity. Yet his Committee of Public Safety unleashed the Reign of Terror, executing thousands in the name of virtue. Even in modern times, Robert Mugabe fought to liberate Zimbabwe from colonial rule, but his rule devolved into violent repression and economic ruin. Robert Mugabe betrayed Zimbabwe's revolution by enriching his ZANU-PF elite while crushing worker movements and handing resources to foreign capitalists, trading colonial oppression for a corrupt, authoritarian pseudo-socialism that failed the working class. The cycle persists when rebellion is fueled by power rather than principle, when the oppressed, once victorious, forget the ideals that inspired their struggle. This shadow side of the rebel shows up even in activism today, when movements become echo chambers, punishing anyone who doesn't align perfectly. Without humility and self-awareness, rebels can lose their original mission and start enforcing new forms of control, just as rigid as the ones they oppressed. And let's not forget that this was a major theme in Animal Farm. Number 4, emotional burnout. Rebelling against an unjust system is often a noble and necessary act, but it's also exhausting. The rebel archetype can lead to emotional burnout, especially when change feels slow or impossible. Constantly pushing against resistance, fighting battles alone, and carrying the weight of injustice can eventually wear down even the most resilient spirit. Consider leaders like Che Guevara, whose revolutionary fervor and uncompromising idealism inspired millions, but whose refusal to rest, negotiate, or temper his own rigid principles left him physically and emotionally depleted. His fight against imperialism was heroic, but the weight of being a global symbol of rebellion, combined with his inability to accept pragmatic compromises, isolated him. In the end, the very intensity that made him a legend also hastened his downfall. In the real world, this kind of burnout can lead to nihilism, the belief that nothing matters, that change is futile. Rebels may find themselves questioning whether their struggle is worth it, especially when facing constant pushback, betrayal, and stagnation. That despair can be as dangerous as the oppression they fight against. The rebel's journey begins not with a sword, but with a refusal to stay silent, to conform, to accept the way things are. The rebel brings necessary disruption, But to be truly effective, rebellion must be guided by wisdom. Without vision, destruction leads only to chaos. When used constructively, the rebel becomes a force for innovation, resistance to propaganda, and personal growth. Think of Rumi, who challenged religious dogma with love and mysticism. Or Martin Luther King Jr., who paired rebellion with strategy and compassion to reshape society. In the end, the rebel isn't just a fighter. They're a creator, not just tearing down the old, but awakening something new. Their power lies in knowing that real freedom starts within. The rebel lives in a paradox, driven by a hunger for freedom, yet always walking the line between liberation and self-destruction. Their fight against oppression can awaken change, or spiral into chaos if purpose is lost. Every act of rebellion carries a cost: relationships, security, even identity. So the question becomes, is rebellion worth the price it demands? The answer might vary from person to person. In the end, strategy and wisdom are the key. True rebellion isn't just about defying authority. It's about awakening to your power, your truth, and what it means to be fully alive. However, as you go along your life's journey, it's important to integrate other archetypes. For example, the hero archetype gives you the courage to take action, but the ruler archetype teaches you how to create structure, lead with purpose, and build something that lasts. To dive deeper into the ruler's path, watch this video here. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos on psychology and spirituality and how the world affects you. Thanks for watching.